Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Saurabh Uboweja. Thank you for that extremely heavy dose introduction. Especially after the lunch, it's going to be difficult to digest for most people. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, the topic I have is even more difficult to digest, actually. Branding, and that's something I've been doing now for about, well, a little over 10 years. And before I began that, interestingly, I was simply a witness to the whole idea of how branding works. I worked with Citigroup for a couple of years, and Citigroup was undergoing a global rebranding exercise. This is right after Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. This was the subprime crisis of 2007-8, and the Citi stock was probably just below $1. Well, that was not the reason for the rebranding. They did have to save their, okay. But the primary reason they had to undergo a rebranding was because they had become Citigroup, which means that they'd acquired several organizations over the last couple of years. And they used to have this stunning umbrella in their logo. I don't know if you remember, some of you, well, many of you have joined education much later. But yeah, the umbrella was something which actually got researched, assessed, and they underwent a proper assessment exercise and came out with a valuation of about $30 million just for the umbrella. And I had my head spinning. I was like, what the hell am I doing as a private banker? This is something more interesting. How can an umbrella be valued at $30 million? They decided to sell off the umbrella to a company which they had bought earlier and then demerged, and they managed a pretty good 150 crores in Indian rupees at that point in time, with which they actually underwent a global rebranding, and the only change was Citigroup to Citi, right? Got rid of the group, got rid of the umbrella, made cool money, and I was like, something is wrong. Well, not with Citigroup. Something is wrong with the way brands are getting created in this country. And I figured out a bit more. I figured out that as a nation, over the last, I don't know how many years or how many decades of our work, we have not really been creating brands. We are not net creators of brands. We are actually net consumers of brands. What I mean by that is, many of us sitting here would be wearing brands which were probably designed, created, conceptualized in many parts of the world, as compared to the brands that we would actually wear, created in India. And some of you will be like, oh, I'm actually wearing an Indian brand right now. But there are actually less than 5 which would have really gone global. Less than 5, right, in the true sense. And that kept on intriguing me a little bit more. And the more I found out, the more intrigued I got. And so my talk is all about trying to help you understand what branding means. And is it really that difficult that we as a nation have failed to create valuable brands that we could really be proud of, that have gone truly, truly international? But before I begin, let's talk about a little bit background about myself. I think, like many of us, we go through typical ups and downs, happy moments, sad moments, not such memorable moments. But there's one particular phase of my life which I vividly recall, and I feel it may have shaped the kind of work I started doing. This is way back in 1989. Some of you were not born. Well, I'm also not too old. Must have been 8 years. And we moved to East Africa. And we lived there for about 5.5 years. And I remember for the first 2 years of my life in East Africa, obviously most of the time was spent in schools if I was not bunking, I was crying every day. There was not a single day that I did not have heavy tears in my eyes, not like one or two drops, heavy tears. Yeah. I was ragged, I was bullied, I was beaten. Yeah, we had corporal punishment pretty much available at that point in time, even in India, I presume. And for 2 years, I had no clue what I was doing in that country. It's amazing. And from there, something happened. I figured out that it was probably because either I came from India, but then it was a bit confusing because there were a lot of Indians in the school. There were apparently Gujarati Indians probably there were more Kenyans than Indians. And even they wouldn't think that I came from a good enough country to be respected. Image was a serious issue for India during the 80s, probably. And this was also the time when probably India had not even seen any kind of the economic growth that we're talking about. IT revolution had not even started. Indian IT workers had not gone out. So everything that people talk about India was probably, this is still in the slums, they live in horrible conditions, they don't eat good food. And to top it all, I couldn't speak their language. The Gujus spoke either Gujarati or Swahili, right? English was not my native language. I'd come from Panipat all the way to Nairobi, and I was like in the middle of nowhere. Let's go a couple of years ahead. Almost 20 years later, actually 24. Yeah. And I got an opportunity to actually speak at one of these global forums in Davos. And I realized that things haven't changed much. In a 100-meter race, the Indians were running 130 meters. Right? You know why? Again, the same old damn image issue. These guys probably don't know what they're doing. They're probably not good at what they're supposed to be doing. But the interesting thing this time was, I realized that back in India, in a 100-meter race, we were running 200 meters. It was even more difficult to prove to people that you were good. So I thought maybe it was easier to do it outside. In Bangalore, I hear it's like almost 400 meters, right? The India average is 130 for a 100-meter race. Yeah. But the interesting thing again was, what is it that we are not doing right, that the whole world is getting right, at least the developed parts of the world? And this kind of defined the reason of why I'm doing what I'm doing now for the last 10 years. I'm on a little bit of a mission right now to figure out how can I simplify branding to its absolute bare minimum, so that each one of you sitting here and the people who may get a chance to listen to this talk later on can start practicing the way brands are built, can actually learn how equity is created, and do not have to face the kind of challenges I may have faced and many others like me would have faced over the years. There have been several aha moments actually. So I may have got a chance to work with maybe about 300 odd organizations, 40 different industries, maybe startups, multinationals, mid-sized family managed businesses. And I also got a chance to teach, and teaching I realized was the most amazing aha moment situation for me. Every time I taught a case study, I was like, wow, these students don't know what's going on with me, but I'm learning something new each time about this extraordinary subject called branding. And I'm learning that it's actually not so difficult. It's easier said than done. It's probably not how the marketers make it look. I figured out what branding was not. It was not advertising. It was not logo design. It was not packaging. It was not website development. It was not PR. It was not image building. I figured out where India was going wrong as a nation was not in the process of image building. By the way, they were not doing that either. But it was the process of equity creation. Value creation was something which was not happening in spite of exceptional levels of talent in this country. And then I figured out it's probably because it is a lack of awareness. Maybe there are not enough people talking about it. And therefore, I feel extremely privileged to be amongst each one of you. And I'm thankful to IIIT Bangalore for inviting me to speak on this subject. But before I do that, I think the topic is demystify. I need to let you guys know what branding is not. A lot of us probably are stuck thinking that it's about being attractive, probably having close to 1 million followers on Instagram. Well, Twitter is off, I understand. Facebook is going to be off. Yeah. But Insta is the new everything, yeah? And then there is an entire vanity concept around it. If you don't have followers, you're not an influencer. If you're not an influencer, you're not a brand, right? And what I want to share with each one of you right here is that you do not have to be attractive to become a brand. The interesting thing is, when you become a brand, people get attracted to you, right? So if you're trying to buy likes, followers, it's great for vanity and it feels really nice, but you still are not a brand. And this is where I want to share with you the incredible story of the sun. The sun apparently was born about 4.6 billion years ago. That's still half the age. It's supposed to die when it turns 10 billion. Some of you should not start buying insurance yet. The Earth is probably just 4 billion years old. The civilization that we are a part of is just about 200,000 years ago. So compare billions to 200,000. That's a big difference. And the Industrial Revolution that we really are part of is about 200 years ago. And the IT revolution is probably just 20, 25 years ago, right? So to give you a sense of how things are organized, but there's something about the sun that you need to know. The sun is only one of the 200 billion stars in the Milky Way, our galaxy. And there's something even more interesting. The Milky Way is just one of the 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. Can you imagine how insignificant the sun is? It's even called a yellow dwarf. Nothing to do with the height, right? I mean, how ugly can a yellow dwarf be, right? And it is not an ordinary star. You know why? Because for all of us sitting here, it means the world. And the world wouldn't have existed if the sun did not exist. Interestingly, if the sun died tomorrow, don't panic yet, still 5 billion years to go, but if it did, scientists say that it would take approximately a week, just a week, before everything dies on Earth. And before that, something else can happen. We could probably be sucked by a black hole, possible, or a big asteroid could just hit upon us, and kill us completely overnight. So many of these things could happen. But what I want to share with you is 7 lessons from the sun, in my assessment, the greatest brand ever. Lesson 1. The sun is not an ordinary star for us. The same way, each one of you have a light within, something that is so special that it can light up the world around you. Lesson number 2, when you start competing with each other, you become ordinary. Imagine if the sun had to compare itself with the other stars. It's just one of the tiniest stars out there. 200 billion other stars. We're only 7 billion people on Earth. But you become ordinary. You are a brand for someone, not for your competitors. Right? Lesson number 3. The sun loves to serve, and it does that rather unconditionally. Imagine if it didn't wake up tomorrow morning and did not provide you the light and heat that we so much enjoy, because of which we live. You would be in trouble. Lesson number 4, the sun almost never brags about itself. And what you'll figure out, that if it did have a Twitter account, it would probably have above 7 billion followers, which would by default be more than everybody combined on Twitter. Lesson number 5, the sun obtains its energy from nuclear fusion, but it's constantly losing itself. Remember, it has an age, but it still has enough stock to last almost forever. It's losing itself to serve you every day. Number 6, it's an exceptionally stable and consistent star. It always wakes up the next day. It is extremely consistent in serving us. Just the right amount of gravitational pull. And it isn't trying to be attractive, because it still means the world to us. Right? So when I talk about all these things, the only thing that I want to conclude by sharing is that, can each one of you be a sun to at least 1 million people whom you can serve unconditionally and create so much equity that you become a brand? But for that to happen, you will have to actually discover what really makes you special. And it's not your friend who's going to tell you that. You will have to discover that. Sometimes through the incidents that you face, sometimes through all those trials and tribulations that you come across, sometimes because of an happy working environment. You can discover yourself in any form. But if you're trying to be somebody else, and you're only trying to impress, it's not that you're not going to be famous, but you'll never feel inside that you're a brand. And to be a brand, the easiest thing to do is find out how you can serve the world in a way which is absolutely effortless, just like the sun. It keeps burning itself, but it never needs to replenish anything after that. And that's my message to you. Thank you very much.